and this is a bold statement. Most school district administrators, especially behind closed doors, have admitted to us that they flat out don't know what's working and what's not working.
Produced by Podcast Architects.
Welcome back to another episode of The Path Forward. I'm your host, Dr. Rick Fernandez, and we're here at TASA Midwinter 2024, Evolve to Solve. I've got a brave, young, intelligent CEO, I don't know about young, that's going to be on the hot seat. James Stoffer, CEO of Abre, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And my co-host, the unbelievably talented Willis ISD Deputy Superintendent John Vaglienty. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You're like, yeah, man. You call me at the last minute, and I got to do all this stuff. So, our theme is Evolve to Solve, and so James has agreed to jump in the hot seat and take questions. Nothing's off the table. You can ask. We hadn't scripted anything. I haven't told James anything about what we're going to ask. First, he's going to give us a little bit about what he does and what does Abre provide.
Sure. So Abre is a data intelligence platform and service company. We partner with school districts all throughout the country to solve really challenging issues around wrestling data, creating a centralized place to go for all of your stakeholders in your learning community, not just administrators. Nothing against administrators. You thrive off of data, but your staff should as well, your parents should as well. Heaven forbid students should as well, in a student agency type of driven way. We can talk about that. And we're really a company that was born out of a product, not the other way around, which you find most in a lot of these other vendors here.
Sure.
What I mean by that is we had a director of technology and a classroom teacher who woke up about 10 years ago and said, we're about to roll out 10,000 Chromebooks and we have no idea what to do. And oh, by the way, our student information system isn't really cut out to store all of the data that we know we're going to be generating on these devices. The learning management system, which was kind of crammed down into K-12 from higher ed, isn't really designed to store all of this data. And so basically they, after a bunch of whiteboarding sessions, kind of threw together what now is the current version of the initial module of Abre called the Student 360, where all data, not just assessment data, although that's important, but all data comes to life for all of your stakeholders within your learning community. So we're all about helping really empower better decision making and drive more efficiency around data because it's incredibly inefficient within school districts.
You just described like 90% of the districts around. I was like, do I know him? Because
probably 99, actually.
That's what I did when we did rollout of laptops and Houston ISD and after COVID. I mean, that's exactly describes some of our struggles as K-12 educators. John, come on, fire away. What data? Stump him.
All right, I've been thinking about some questions to ask the last couple of days. So what differentiates Abre from other platforms out there?
Well, Abre is, first of all, a really great name because it's Spanish for open. And there's intentionality behind that, obviously, which is meant to portray that most of your systems within school districts right now are closed. Intentionally.
So expand on that.
Like a student information system doesn't want a lot of foreign data in there because that really becomes your main vehicle for state reporting, right? Mm-hmm. Your learning management system isn't really built to take in things around social emotional or mental health or what's happening from a MTSS or intervention level or whatever, right? That might be housed in another system. There's really no one system to manage student plans, federal, state, district, school. And so Abre is open to ingesting all of that data, and we're also open to helping you collect whatever data you might be collecting in a super inefficient way, like through a Google form. We see this all the time. Or even, heaven forbid, some districts are still, and some schools are still collecting data from parents or students or even their staff by the way of a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And how do you leverage that when you're trying to advance the decisions that you want to make around supporting students in and out of the classroom? And that's another differentiator. So one, open, two, in and out of the classroom is really critical. So we're not just talking about academics here.
Okay.
We're talking about all the things that could potentially influence how a student comes to school, how they engage in school or not, how are they doing non-academically, how are they thinking through kind of their trajectory within their school career in K-12 from a graduation or a planning perspective. We know that every student is going to do one of four things. And we call them the 4 E's, right? They're either going to go into education, advanced education, right? Higher education. They're going to go direct into employment. They're going to go direct into the military or enlistment, the 3rd E. And the 4th E is entrepreneurship. And I think that districts struggle in kind of creating a comprehensive approach to how they manage that challenge.
Okay.
Yet you read all of these districts' strategic plans, and it's like it's really well balanced now. It's not just about improving math and ELA on the STAR test, albeit that's still in there, of course.
Sure.
But what about things like Portrait of a Graduate? Or what about all of the soft skills? What about the internships and the apprenticeships that are really going to help them explore is post-secondary education and its cost right for me? And so where does that happen? Where does that conversation around data happen at the whole child level for all of the stakeholders to be able to get access to? It doesn't really exist right now. So that's kind of the third and final differentiator. All data, because we're open, all of the stuff that is balancing the in-classroom and out-of-classroom. And then the third differentiator is for all stakeholders. So there's a lot of data dashboarding companies out there that are built for you. And that's not a bad thing.
Right.
But really that was birthed out of what? The era of No Child Left Behind. It was all about test scores. It was all about predicting how are we going to do on the STAR, you know, and all of that good stuff. But I think we've wisened up, and maybe as a result of the pandemic where it was exacerbated, wow, there might be other issues at play here that could influence the STAR, right? Maslow's before Bloom and all of that good stuff, right? So I think, and we believe, and this was certainly the thesis and the impetus behind Abre in the beginning, was why are we only building tools for teachers when there's other frontline staff that need to benefit from this, like intervention specialists or MTSS coordinators or mental health clinicians or whoever? Why are we building data dashboards for administrators, but there's not a waterfall or a cascading effect down to principals? Why are principals looking at different dashboards than district administrators? And then finally, why are we looking at yesterday's data, last week's data, last month's data, last year's data, when we're making a decision about what we're doing with the student today? And so that's really critical because it levels the playing field in terms of transparency and access in a role-based permission way. Obviously, we would never give anybody access to sensitive information that they're not permitted to have within the school system. But let's level the playing field and let's not guess as to what's happening with that student, and even bring it down into the home and, like I said before, to the student. And then the last component to all stakeholders is a lot of districts, I think, as heightened by the pandemic, but this was certainly the case in a lot of big districts. You said Houston ISD.
Yeah.
How many community partners does Houston ISD rely on every year?
I mean, a lot.
I can bet you it's well over 1,000, right?
Yeah.
What is the inefficiency around access to student data for those partners, or vice versa? What is the inefficiency for the data to come back into the school?
Okay.
So now in Abre, we do have the concept of a key stakeholder being all of your community partners that can get in a FERPA, HIPAA compliant type of a way, access that data, document dosage or document attendance or document notes as to what you're doing with that intervention or whatever it is as to why that student is coming to your service, and then have it real time flow back to people in the classroom or in the school building to be able to access that. So one, you're not emailing spreadsheets and sensitive information which makes you non-FERPA compliant. And then two, the real-time aspect, which is if a student went to a wraparound service or a math tutor on a Saturday morning that you are providing for them via the school district, well, I sure as heck would want to know if I'm the math teacher on Monday what they did on Saturday.
Yeah.
But that doesn't exist right now. So the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, oftentimes inside school districts because of departments, and I certainly believe, and we are big proponents of ensuring that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing for all of those non-employees that are interacting with students to move the needle for them outside of school.
So I got to think that, because I know some of the pushback has always been, and no offense to my CTO buddies out there, but hey, we've got all these systems and they all have to do A, B, or C to integrate to any other system that was going to be a part of the district. So what you're saying is y'all solve for all of that, right? Whether it's frontline or whatever, all the systems that we normally use.
Yeah.
Is there any barriers to saying, all right, let's just give it to you and figure it out and make it all one?
No. So when I said earlier about what Abre is, we're the product, but then we're also equally, if not arguably more, of a service company. What do I mean by that? Our take is that when you walk into a district and you're talking with the superintendent and the C-suite and the CTO and their team, it's not for a lack of competence. It might be a capacity challenge. It might be a collaboration challenge.
Right.
It might be any of those kind of challenges that have impeded on certain other technologies' implementation and success, or more often than not, lack thereof.
Right.
Because more and more districts that we go into and we talk to, they are really willing to be transparent around where they've messed up or where other products have kind of under-delivered against the promise. And one of our biggest tenets and one of our biggest value is over-delivering. Let's exceed expectations. And you can only do that by, unfortunately, in this space, because there's not the capacity. And in certain districts, they might not have a big tech team. And the tech person is really kind of we talked about this last time I was on your show. Maybe they came up through the ranks of like pliers and wires and hardware and all of that good stuff, and they don't necessarily have the chops to be able to do a lot of the data extraction or the data interoperability or the whatnot. So when
100%.
we come in, we say, okay, identifying that could be a challenge for you, let's not just sell you a product and send you on your way and it's up to you all to figure this out. We actually white glove from helping with data extraction to data integration to centralizing all of your data in a normed way. So you might in lower school, in your lower grades, be using NWA map for benchmarking. But in your upper classes and your upper grades, you might be doing something like an iReady or some other type of a form of a benchmark assessment. Well, because we get your data in from the student information system and those two assessment systems and all of the plethora of other systems that are generating a lot of data for you, if we just started adding all of this data with no rhyme or reason into our database on your behalf, we wouldn't be able to aggregate any of it, and we certainly wouldn't be able to norm it against what else is happening maybe in districts down the road for eventual,
It'd be useless.
Really interesting analysis, right? So what we call data as a service, which is how can we be your data partner to help you move, clean, centralize, and create visualizations on your behalf as if you had your own internal data warehouse and you had a bunch of data scientists and analysts who are capable of building all of these reports for you. And so because of that, we really pride ourselves on kind of a white glove service during implementation that not a lot of other vendors and data providers and data dashboard companies will do, because they don't take a custom approach to that. They basically try to find a scalable model, which is like, just get us your data, then it will fit into this, and this is the dashboard that you get. Our philosophy is, well, what if you don't like that dashboard? Or what if that dashboard doesn't solve the main burning question that you have? Why don't we start with the end in mind? What is the question that you're trying to solve, and then work backwards to what data do we need to get? What visualization do you like? Oftentimes we make the joke that one of the funniest kind of requests that our data analysts and our data scientist team get is, can you change the color of that blue to this blue because that more matches our brand, you know? But the point there is that we don't come in with an opinion as to what you want to do with your data and what decisions you want to make. You have an opinion against that. And it probably starts with your strategic plan. But we go into districts all the time and we say, how often are you looking at your performance against your strategic plan? And if they're being honest,
minimal.
It might be every quarter, but it typically is every summer at our superintendent's annual performance review.
Right.
So then that begs the question, well, what other data are you looking at to drive the outcomes that are tied to your strategic plan?
What you say is important.
Right, because this is what the community has agreed to with your board, right? So there's a disconnect when we go into school districts about some of this stuff, and sometimes it's from a competency level to get all that data out, but we try to help there. But more often than not, it's a capacity issue because they don't have the bodies or they don't have the time, they don't have the resources. And so instead of us just coming in and being a product organization, we want to come in and be a solution organization which breaks down between product and services.
All right, come on, John, let's go.
We were talking to Zach the other night. We were talking through the MTSS process. How does Abre help break down that MTSS process, not just for administrators, but for teachers?
Yeah. First with MTSS, it starts with identification. And I'd argue better identification and more frequent. So instead of identifying students who are Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, maybe every 10 to 12 weeks, why aren't we potentially through almost like an early warning dashboard or an MTSS type like dashboard, why aren't we looking at, as data comes in that helps weigh certain variables within that equation of if they are Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, why aren't we looking at that data real time? And so for us, first and foremost is just building the framework around what data do we need to bring into our system to identify students against an MTSS framework. 2, then it's the creating workflows and notifications around students who are more in real time coming and going. Mm-hmm. So, and I'll come back to that with an example that we've seen with a school district in Ohio around over-serving their kids, by the way. Then the third part is, I think the challenge with schools, especially at the teacher level, is all of this extra added work beyond just teaching math, social studies, ELA, and and science. Is this working? And so what we want to get to is the heart of, if you have this amount of time that you dedicate towards this student because they've been flagged and identified, we have sent you a notification that now, something's happening here, whether it's an academic or a non-academic issue, which, by the way, that's the other component to this, which is MTSS, in certain cases, has just been the reskinning of RTI, right? And that's actually not the intention behind MTSS. It's multi-tier,
yes.
And it is multi-faceted in the sense that it's not just academic, it is behavioral, it is truancy, it is some of the other challenges that districts struggle with. But to the last point, and I'll try to make this brief, which is, how do you document what you're doing? So what are you measuring the dosage of your intervention? If you are pulling that student out for a really intensive reading intervention, are you documenting that? How much time they're spending with the intervention specialist? What are they doing during that intervention itself? And then pulling that back into the classroom data for the teacher to then be able to identify what is and what isn't working. So, there are a couple companies that are out there that are like, we're the MTSS company. And it's like, well, MTSS is a framework. It's not a product. Right. Like, you can't silver bullet it. And the reason why I say that is because MTSS isn't just for the teacher. If you're doing it correctly, it's actually for the teacher, the intervention specialist, perhaps the community partner that isn't even employed. We were talking about that before, as well as then the real-time data aggregation and the visualizations around what's working and what's not working for principals and for district administrators. So it really requires a ton of alignment. So because, back to one of the, what is Abre and what is the value, because we have all stakeholders coming into Abre at a very frequent clip, like to the tune of 90+% of staff log into Abre more than once a week, to the tune of what are they doing? They're consuming data to make better data-driven decisions around student outcomes. That's kind of the basis of MTSS, ideally. That's kind of how we're different in how we can help districts solve this MTSS problem, because you don't just buy a product for MTSS, you got to get your entire community, inclusive of the student, on board to identify, to notify any changes real time before it's too late, and then actually in one place document the intervention, so then you can have a flywheel on feedback on, is it working or not?
So one of the struggles is not only, I mean, we've got a lot of data, right?
Too much, actually.
Yes. But you get to the point where, all right, I can actually synthesize, and it's in some usable form. do you guys help with some of the action steps? Because I know there's many districts out there that say, we're here.
Yeah.
What's the next best step? Is
Yeah.
it master schedule? Is it more interventionists? Is it more staff, less staff?
Is it more tier 1 instruction, less intervention, or like how specific?
And I know it's like we're the experts, right? We're supposed to.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we're just like, oh, okay, what's next?
Yeah. I think you're hitting at exactly what districts are asking us to help them crack, right? Which is the now what.
Yeah, the so what.
It is, well, it's the so what, it's the now what,
Yeah.
it's the, hopefully it's not the so what, it's the for what, to what end, or now what are we going to do about it? And what I'd say with that is, there's a reactive posture that you can take, which I think is kind of what we're describing, which certain districts kind of even still struggle with. It's like, okay, we've done the identification. Now what are we going to do, right? So
let me ask you this. Could I ask you, hey, you guys have done some great work with districts around the country. Do you have a repository of what those steps are from is that something, and obviously you got to be careful with what you share and how you share, but we steal from each other like it's, and that's what we do.
That's okay. I mean, we should, because we're talking about students in the long run, right? So yes, we can, right? We're building a big repository of, like when you come and partner with us, instead of starting with a complete blank slate and you telling us what questions you want answers to, we say, here's a library of 350 reports that we've built for other school districts that have come before you.
Sure.
That's great because that gets you a head start on thinking, maybe how do we even start this implementation? What do we prioritize? Then there's the more kind of advanced stuff, which is where I was going, which is it's not just about the identification, it's about the documentation about the now what. So I don't want to sit here and suggest that we have opinions on every single strategy that you could do with students based off of a MTSS or early warning dashboard. Ultimately, that's for you. But I can tell you that we are and have for the last 3 or 4 years been documenting those actions. And where this all goes is from a big data perspective, think about what machine learning is. That's exactly what it is, right? Yep. So if you look on our website, I think there's a graphic that we came up with that talks about kind of a visualization of how we help. We help with the collection and centralization, then we move you to visualization, that's the identification stuff. Moving beyond that, we talk about synthesizing your data. I don't know if you stole that from me last time, or you were checking out our website, or you're just a chemistry major. That's fine, but it's a chemistry term.
He's just going to come in here and rag the host.
Well, you said that I was going to get roasted, but hey, it's a two-way street.
No,
so, no, I'm just kidding.
I love this.
Synthesizing data is actually really difficult to do because you have to start with but what are we going to do with this newly formed or newly created data and intelligence that comes out of that? And so we quickly help school districts move beyond just visualization for visualization's sake to, like, how can we help you create new data? Like, new data would be in the form of MTSS, real time or early warning, or flagging and predicting for students who are going down the wrong path from an attendance truancy issue or whatever it might be, right? It's kind of all open. But the fifth stage, which is really where we are growing and really where our clients are helping us grow into, which is we're kind of sick of living in where we've been up until we partnered with you, a very reactive posture. So now that we're partnered with you, because we're synthesizing new data, we're kind of in a more posture of real time. Yeah. But we want to get to a place where it's more predictive, right? And so that's where machine learning and AI can come in. And so we're completely hosted up in the Google Cloud architecture. If you go to Google's website, they actually have a case study on us, which is pretty cool. And what that allows us to do and where we're going is this concept of, why don't we start building, after years and years of collecting this data, and documenting what have been the actions that have been taken off of the identification, we can now start prompting that database in Google with AutoML and some of the other things that they can do, and prompting it to start looking for trends, to start looking for identifiers before it happens at a student level. And what would be the obvious ones? The obvious ones would be academic at risk or a trajectory towards it, broken down between math, ELA. And we've got a direct API into iReady, a direct API into NWEA, and we're getting really rich data from them to be able to do that. We're not just getting the RIT score, if you're familiar with NWEA, we're getting 250 pieces of data every single time a student submits the NWEA test, right, the pre, mid, post. And so with all of that data, combined with all of the other whole child data, combined with us helping districts document the interventions that they've been doing with the kids, you get to a place where you can, and we are going to start making a pretty major investment in this, get to a place where we can start building predictions and help our districts get to the proactive posture. So in a quick 3-year transition from you've been reactionary because all of your stuff are in silos and you got to pull it all manually and you got to do your manual analysis, to us automating and getting in centralized and visualizing and synthesizing your data real time, to now we can do all of that coupled with predictions for intelligent decision type making. That's really where I see us helping in the now what around some big things that are probably not specific to you or your school district,
Sure,
right? So
sure.
that could be something as simple or as basic as what are some predictions around student attendance, and what are some playbooks or what are some recommendations that you would do now that you have all of your stakeholders connected to this prediction of John potentially, his trajectory moving towards a place where he's going to start struggling with attendance, and let's not only flag that that's going to be an issue here pretty soon, and here's the rationale why in the model, but also come up with 3 or 4 recommendations as to what you might do with John. And an example of that would be, let's refer them to an intervention specialist who specializes on attendance around parental engagement, because maybe that's the thing that's flagged, right? There could be a correlation here or a causation thing. If you don't dig down into that, you don't know. So I think we will be able to here pretty soon advance the now what answer through predictive modeling, through machine learning, and through artificial intelligence based on data that we've collected amongst all of our clients, not based off of some framework that's out there that a nonprofit puts together, which, by the way, that might be good and that might be the strategy, but over the course of time, what you want from a data partner in Abre is you want us to validate and substantiate that that actually works. Because here's the last thing I'll say, and this is a pretty bold statement. Most school district administrators, especially behind closed doors, but sometimes in a public setting, and what I mean by public setting is maybe in front of their team, right, have admitted to us that they flat out don't know what's working and what's not working.
Right. That's not a secret. Is that a secret? I mean,
they've just flat out don't know what's working and what's not working.
Okay.
And so I had a superintendent confide in me. This was behind closed doors, and because of that, I'm going to redact his name and his district. But in Southern California, that said, pre-pandemic, we were spending about $3.5 million on ed tech tools, as he called them, right? Well, we got some house money from the feds, right, and from the state. And so we started buying all of this stuff. I don't know what's working and what's not working, and I know that this fiscal cliff is coming, and I just asked my board, this was last summer, I just asked my board to renew $6.5 million worth of ed tech tools. So they've increased their spend by nearly 100%. Pre-pandemic to where they're at now. And the board has just asked me to come with data around what's working and what's not working to justify continuing to spend $6.5 million. And so who is right and who is wrong? The answer is you don't know.
Yeah.
Like, is it the teacher who is defending that product? Is it the curriculum specialist who can't live without that product?
Right.
Is it the CAO who's bought a lot of stuff to try to fill in gaps and is going to have, and rightfully so because we're human, an emotional tie to some initiative that we believed when we bought it, when we were in that buyer's high, was going to actually move the needle for kids. So the intentionality has always been really pure and really great with all of these things, all of these purchases for the most part. But if you can't answer the question of what is causal, what is corollary, and what is working to actually improve student outcomes, which should be the goal in all of this, we don't know. Why are we doing it, right? And so that's ultimately like the big question and there's a reason why we start with superintendents, deputy superintendents, CAOs, CTOs, and CFOs. because these questions are happening at a more regular clip in our industry and behind closed doors and in executive cabinet meetings than ever before. And we're still relying on emotion and gut and other people on our team to tell us what's working as opposed to us. And sometimes heavy is the head that wears the crown. Like, you got to make the decision, right? But if you don't have the right data and it's not transparent and it's not directly mapped back to student outcomes,
You're guessing.
It's making decisions in the fog.
Yeah, you're throwing darts.
And there are certain leaders that are great at making decisions in fog, right? There is actually, I think, a good outcome when you mix both the quantitative and the qualitative. But if all you're doing is making decisions off of qualitative or emotions or anecdotes or
Yeah.
Anyway, I could go on and on and on about that, if that makes sense.
I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
All right, so you kind of touched on it a little bit. The impact that Abre has at home for parents, like what are parents able to see in real time?
Oh man, this is awesome, because this is where our co-founder Chris selfishly started. One, because he was a classroom teacher, he was a high school math teacher, and he was like, I'm sick of logging in all these different places. I'm going to write scripts to get all that data out and put it into one place, which, as I was talking about before, which is where we started, the Student 360. His very next challenge that he was seeking to solve was, I've got all these parents coming and asking pretty random questions, or they've got kind of misleading concerns as to what's happening with their child. It's like he recalls a story about a parent coming into his classroom one day and was like, is she going to be okay? He's like, what do you mean? Like, she's got like pretty much all A's and B's on all of her quizzes and her unit tests and everything. Mm-hmm. And the parent was like, oh, well, I just saw a test come home that, she got a C on, so I'm really worried. And he's like, she's fine, mm-hmm. right? And so I think teachers today who operate in an environment where there's not transparency with parents, where do those questions often fall? They fall during parent-teacher conference nights, which are 10 minutes, because the teacher's got to get to the next set of parents. We sit down, we rapid fire at you what their test scores are, what their behavior is, what their goals are, then we leave, right? Yeah. And there's no opportunity other than 10 minutes 3 times a year during parent-teacher conference to really engage in a meaningful dialogue around what's happening at the student level, both academically and non-academically, right? So the next component to what Chris then started to build, again, selfishly for he and his district with Zach, the director of technology, was a parent portal. And the parent portal to have everything, all of their test scores, all of their grades, not just their final grade, all of their documentation, whether it's a transcript, once they've graduated, or if it's a report card, because some of that stuff is housed in the student information system, yet those are built 30, 40 years ago and aren't at all beautiful to look at and really difficult because you have to have multiple logins. Oftentimes you forget your login, all that good stuff. I'll come back to the login scenario here in a second. You have to log into your learning management system, maybe to see grades. You have to log into something else, maybe to see, and this is if you're a more advanced district, anything around an IEP or a 504, right? The concept of a CUME folder doesn't really exist in an electronic format. And so Chris said, well, what if we could do that and then give access to parents in a super easy way in three ways. The login is really critical. You can log in with Facebook. When they implemented that, they saw that their their parent engagement and login rates from when they were previously logging into the parent portal through the student information system at less than a 10% clip. It went from 10% up to 85% overnight when they added the ability for you to log in with your personal Gmail account, your personal Hotmail or Microsoft account, or your personal Facebook account. You log in, and then what happens is you get to redeem a code or a token that says you're Susie's parent, right? And Johnny's parent. And that's another really critical component here. So 1, no login credentials, no usernames and passwords. 2, when you log in, you see in a drop-down all of your students in one place. You don't have to have separate logins to have separate parent access points, like is very often the case in a lot of these systems that I mentioned. And then the third component, and why we see this really rich parental engagement, is back to all of the data. real time. So we have a district in southwestern Ohio that has 93% parent engagement into our portal at least once a week.
It's not bad.
It's incredible.
That's incredible.
And why is that important? Not just the action of logging in, but what are they doing?
Right.
Which obviously today with modern technology, you can actually measure. What are they doing?
What's important to them?
Well, where are they going? They're going to the Student 360, and they're going to a place where they can also receive personalized, tailored communications. Because now, instead of, and this is another component of all of this, parent engagement often gets conflated in school districts with parent communication.
Oh yeah, there's totally
Parent
misinterpreted.
communication is not engagement, right? And I would argue, and I would suggest that where our districts really want to get to is even beyond engagement to empowerment. And how do you empower teachers and parents to really build really great relationships? It's got to be at the student data level.
Well, wouldn't I be able to so I log on, right, and we've been using this for a while. I start to pull out the trends of what the parents are going to understand what is most important,
Absolutely.
what is most valuable, and what could they care less about.
Absolutely.
Is that
Totally?
Am I thinking about that wrong?
No. So we track engagement obviously by user type, and
Okay.
with parents, I'll tell you exactly. I mean, this is no secret. They log in, they click into the Student 360, and they go straight to the assessments tab to see how their students are faring on formative and benchmark assessments.
Grades and attendance, I bet.
And
right?
grades is the next, then attendance is the one after that.
How much are they spending on lunch, and why am I getting these calls about their lunch count being?
You got to put like a block on Tuesday, Thursday. Like my little guy can't get ice cream every day.
Yeah,
Twice a week.
Yeah. My daughter loves the chicken nuggets, and my son loves the waffle. You know.
Did you want to ask him if it will communicate with MySpace?
No, I mean,
I think we moved beyond MySpace.
Well,
Yeah. Are you still connected with each other on MySpace?
he's still friends with Tom.
Yeah. Yeah.
So really, it sounds to me like you guys have vertically aligned every data program or protocol that a parent needs. I mean, let's be honest. Like you said, when you send out a parent communication, that's great. You're communicating. It doesn't mean they're going to read it, or it goes to their junk mail, or they have it blocked,
That's
or
right.
They're still asking questions on Facebook or on Twitter or on Instagram. You're giving them an opportunity to get all the information here without going to different platforms, which makes it so much easier. Because you're right. I mean, like, how many passwords do we have?
Way
Like
too
if I want
many.
to go to the lunch menu, I want to go to grades, I want to go to School Cash Online to buy their athletic uniform. I can't remember all those passwords, right? I got it written down. So you guys are giving an easy platform for all data, for everything their student, and it just benefits teachers and administrators as well.
Yeah, and there's a component of the kind of communication angle which we haven't hit yet, which is there still is important. There still is relevance, and it is important to mass communicate, to push communications, right? You can do that within Abre as well. So as you build kind of communication channels and announcements, is this an announcement that needs to hit every stakeholder so that when even a staff member logs in, they boom, see an announcement, which would be no different than Twitter, but how do you know that they consume it, right? Or if you're a parent and there's maybe something in particular related to your student, whether they're behind on a student lunch fee or when you log in as that parent, that communication is tailored to you. So we get away from calls and emails around personalized communication, and we do that all, in some cases, in an automated way. So as the data triggers something, that then creates a notification that can go out via email, an in-app notification, or a text message, right? So the last component with communications is, I think, having push communications, having pooled communications, which drives that engagement, is why a lot of districts that partner with us, and by the way, a lot of this sounds kind of too good to be true, and admittedly that's the way that a lot of new district prospects that we're talking with in the beginning kind of react, and we totally get it. And there's a reason why we kind of use the analogy of, let's think about this from a crawl, walk, run, and then sprint type of an analogy, right? You would never want to, in year one, try to tackle all of your data challenges from a visualization, decision making at the district level, the building level, and turn on everything for your frontline staff around collecting data or visualizing data for them, and turn on a new parent portal, and get your students in there to start submitting artifacts against, their capstone or their portrait of a graduate or whatever. So typically, 90+% of our district level engagements are a 3-year partnership, and we kind of crawl, walk, run. There's malleability there, there's flexibility in there, of course, but I say all of that to say, by the time parents and students start logging into Abre, you're now kind of 2 to 3 years down the implementation cycle, so that there's stuff that is relevant to them.
Yeah.
It's not just the capacity to do it, it's the context to which it's delivered, right?
Yes.
And so we're really passionate about helping districts with that change management, with their consolidation, with thinking differently about how they use technology. And in our world, it's what we call the technology stack, right? So a CRM is kind of stacked on top of an ERP, then there's things that are stacked on top of the CRM for sales or marketing or customer service or whatever. But it all comes back to, in that concept, a customer 360. In this concept, it's the student 360, because I'd argue the student is the customer. And so as you get more and more people looking at that data, there's more and more that you can do with them from an engagement and a communication perspective to recreate the desire for them to continue to come in. So the last thing that I'll say there is, we've got districts that have completely turned off their LMS, their student information, and their parent communication portals, because we can consolidate all 3 of those functions into one, because we have all of the data, we can create automation, we can create communication in a way that is 100% trackable.
Last question for you.
Yeah.
As a superintendent, let's say we're going down the road and we feel good about where our parent student portal, how they're viewing it and how they're using it. I want to create some data savviness within all of my departments, right? The finance department, the custodial staff. Can I build out some components or some data pieces where I have a sense of how efficient are we being with our cleaning service and upkeep of the building and use life of certain things? Can I build out something that's our budget cycle and where things are going? So when I get to a bond ask, right? When I get to a bond ask, I'm not just saying, hey, believe me, our stuff is old or we're not being, but I can make the case of my efficiency from 3 years, 5 years, whatever my tenure is. Like, look how efficient and intentional I've been about our tax dollars and our and making our teams aware of that. Like, where are we? We're a little lax here, and we can be tighter here, and it's for the benefit of everybody, because maybe we don't necessarily need everybody here. Or is that possible?
It's a good question. I mean, anything is possible to a certain degree, right? We do have CFOs logging into Abre, looking at financial dashboards.
Yes.
And the beauty about that is, it's not just a financial dashboard in a siloed financial data reporting tool. It's that juxtaposed or overlaid with student data, right? Student outcome data. So my brain goes there. At the end of the day, the reason why you do all of this is for student outcomes, right? We were talking about this last night at dinner. And so if it's not, well, why are we doing it? Kind of some of the questions that we were asking before. But I say that to say, we do have superintendents, boards of education, certainly CFOs right now, in that example that I gave with the fiscal cliff coming and ESSER dollars going away, that are very much so asking the question, hey, can you help us not just visualize where we've spent all of our money, but what has actually been corollary to outcomes. Impact.
Yeah.
And so I think the point there being, we're not limited to just storing and creating a database around student data. You can bring in and overlay finance data. You can bring in and overlay HR data. What about teacher certification and professional development? What about teacher attendance?
Retention.
In union states, this might be a difficult ask. But in non-union states, if I, like here in Texas, I've got an initiative called the TIA, the Texas Incentive Allotment, and I have a lot of money that I can incentivize teachers who are exemplar or master teachers, where some of the data that factors into that is obviously student outcomes and student performance, but what about overlaying attendance or certification or professional development, or whatever that might be? So the point there is, all of it still, I think, should be solar eclipse aligned for student outcomes, but to what person is asking that question and through what lens they're looking at it is capable within Abre, because we don't say no. We're open. Bring in whatever data you want.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
One final question. With ISDs, like you said, the financial cliff is coming, right? ESSER money's gone. School districts running on deficit budgets.
Yeah.
What's the per dollar that Abre can save ISDs by vertically aligning?
Obviously this is contingent on your student population. It's contingent on how much stuff you bought. I didn't say junk, but how much stuff you bought. All I can give you is a couple examples, right?
Sure.
So for a district that's got about 20,000 students, not in the state of Texas, but over the course of 2 years, we've been able to help save them over $1 million by cutting out supplementary tools that just either aren't being used at all or are being used but is not working for some demographics or some subsets of their students. Because especially during the pandemic, in that situation, it was like, oh my God, like we got to get it for everybody, right? Like we got to ensure no students are falling through the cracks. So let's go out and buy a digital reading supplement, right? And we're going to buy it K through 8. And then when you look at it and peel back the data 3 years later, you're like, oh, that was really only implemented with fidelity at a third of your school buildings. Mm-hmm. 2/3 of your buildings didn't even really use it, so that's an immediate cost savings, because clearly there's not either a value there or the implementation didn't go, or whatever. That's not really for us to, the data speaks for itself in that regard. Then the third that is being used with fidelity, where is it actually delivering on that product's promise around growth? So if you use it or if you play, right, the gamification of some of these tools, right? It doesn't matter. We know at the data level, if it's being used, we can overlay that with academic and non-academic data to then give you that really rich answer. So it's not that we came in and we're like the hatchet guys and we're like, oh, cut that. We just expose back to this idea around what's working and what's not working. And oftentimes is the case, it's like, oh, it's not working because we didn't put the capacity behind it, or we didn't put the vigor behind the implementation.
It was somebody else's idea.
Because it was somebody else's idea, predated me, or whatever it might be. And it doesn't really matter. What matters is make the decision around fiscal responsibility now that actually moves the needle for kids. And you can also say that's not just from a where do you put your treasure, your dollars. You can also put that for where do you put your talent and where do you put your time. Yeah. Because those things aren't, you're not growing your budget. You're not growing your people that you've got to drive better student outcomes. You can't make time to do more things, right? If anything, we have to help you save time. So there's tangible dollars that we can help districts save by making more better outcome-related decisions around what they buy. We can also help them save money by opportunity costs, by not spinning their wheels on a program that simply isn't moving the needle. And then we can help them save, quite frankly, their sanity on what they're asking their people to do, right? Yeah. How many people on the front lines at districts right now today, not in your district, of course, but in districts, that are like, I have no idea why the hell I'm doing this.
Yeah. There's a few.
I think there's probably some, right? And so that's what we want to help, right? We want the clarity to help you make those better decisions, get out of the fog. And if that is related to, we got to save money because the cliff is coming, okay, we can do that. Or if it's we've invested a lot in this program, we're throwing a lot of bodies at it, is it moving the needle? Into which we can help you say, with clarity and with confidence, yes it is, but maybe not for all. Maybe for a subset.
Gotcha. James, thank you for being here. Before we go, if somebody's interested in Abre, how do they contact you or contact their sales representative if they want to get involved?
Thanks for the opportunity. They just go to abre.com. I would suggest, we're all kind of visual learners today. We all like to watch videos. You can go into the lengthy libraries that we have around case studies and all that good stuff. But I would suggest just watch the first 90-second video on our homepage to just get a sense of what we do. And then reach out to us at sales@abre.com, and we'd be happy to set you up with a demo with our great product and sales teams.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you for being here and being on the hot seat, and thank you for co-hosting, JV. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me again.
You got it. And to our audience, if you like what you heard and saw, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Produced by Podcast Architects.